The lawyer looked up from the papers, folded his hands neatly, and said it as if it were any other line in the will. She wasn't included. The room went still. My brother leaned back in his chair, a satisfied little smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. My sister cleared her throat and glanced at her perfectly manicured nails. No one looked directly at me. I was invisible. Again. It wasn't a surprise, not really. I'd had a feeling from the moment I walked into the conference room and saw that my seat was the only one without a name card. I wasn't even worth a label, just a chair, just air. But still hearing it aloud, it hit different. No inheritance, no letter of gratitude, not even a trinket. My parents left me nothing, not a penny, not a plate, not a word. I smiled, softly, politely. And that's when I knew they had no idea. They had no idea the house they were all fighting over wasn't theirs to claim. They didn't know that 6 months before Dad passed, he sat at the kitchen table in his faded flannel pajamas, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "You've done more for me than either of them ever will. The house is yours. I want you to have peace when I'm gone." They didn't know I had already filed the paperwork. Quietly, legally. No drama, no announcement. Just a clean signature, a notarized stamp, and a transfer of ownership. The deed, it only had one name now. Mine. The lawyer cleared his throat and moved on to the next section, reading aloud the list of sentimental items left to my siblings. My brother got Dad's watch collection. My sister got the diamond earrings that once belonged to Grandma. They both lit up like children on Christmas morning. No one asked if I was okay. No one even thanked me for the years I stayed behind while they lived their shiny lives out of state. I was the one who skipped vacations to take Mom to chemo. I was the one who spoon-fed Dad applesauce when he couldn't hold a fork. I was the one who cried in the shower at 3 a.m. so no one would hear me break. But sure, give them the jewelry, give them the stuff, let them believe they won. After the reading, my sister cornered me by the elevator. "I'm sorry, Julia," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "I guess Mom and Dad just thought you didn't need anything." I nodded. "I guess so." She tilted her head. "So, about the house. You're staying there for now," I said. "Well, I mean, it's technically no," I interrupted, meeting her eyes. "It's not. It's mine. The deed was signed over months ago. It's already been recorded." Her smile vanished. She blinked. "Once. Twice. But they didn't say they didn't need to," I said, stepping into the elevator. "Because they already did." The door slid shut. The last thing I saw was her stunned face staring back at me, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in that family in a long, long time. Power. Not revenge, not rage, just quiet, unshakable power. That night, I walked through the house alone. Our house. The hallway still smelled faintly of my mother's lavender oil. The hardwood floor creaked in the exact same spot it always had since we were kids. I passed the kitchen, where I'd spent countless nights heating up soup, cutting pills, changing bedding, catching my breath. They left me nothing, but I had everything. Not just the deed, but the memories, the truth, and my name finally on something I didn't have to share. They always say family takes care of each other, but in my family, taking care meant I stayed while they left. My sister Angela moved to New York when she was 23. She called every few weeks at first, but those calls turned into voicemails, then holiday group texts. My brother Nate took a job in Colorado and came home maybe once a year, twice if there was a funeral. They built their lives, got their promotions, joined wine clubs, and posted photos of ski trips and rooftop dinners. I stayed. I stayed because someone had to. Mom's health began to decline, quietly missed steps, forgotten appointments. Then came the diagnosis, early onset Alzheimer's. It hit like a wave you see coming, but can't stop. I was 35 at the time, recently laid off with no partner or kids. So I told myself, you can help for now, just until things stabilize. That now became a decade. I got part-time jobs close to home. I turned down a position in Chicago that would have doubled my income. I missed friends' weddings. I stopped dating. There was always another prescription to refill another fall, to monitor another emergency room trip. When Dad had his first stroke, the little I had left of my independence was gone. He was never an easy man, proud, stubborn, but when he lost half the use of his body, he clung to me like I was the only solid thing left in his world. And I was, for both of them. Angela and Nate visited Sure, but it was always in short bursts. Angela would show up in heels, drop off a fruit basket, and complain about the smell of the house. Nate would check his watch every 20 minutes and say things like, "You should really look into a professional caregiver," as if I hadn't already sacrificed my life filling that role for free. On holidays, they acted like a united front. They'd bring bottles of wine and tell me how grateful they were. Angela once hugged me on Christmas Eve and whispered, "We couldn't do this without you." But when Mom passed and Dad got worse, the thank yous disappeared. I became expected, a fixture, a given. My name wasn't Julia anymore. It was "Can you" and "Would you mind?" I was the daughter who cleaned the bedpans and argued with insurance companies. The sister who updated everyone with carefully written emails no one responded to. And I didn't complain. Not once. Because I told myself, this is what love looks like. This is what the good one does. Until the day I overheard Angela on the phone with Nate in the backyard, talking about Dad's estate. She's not going to expect anything right. I mean, she lived there rent-free all these years. Rent-free. That word pierced me deeper than any insult ever could. They saw my life not as a sacrifice, but as a free ride. They saw my loneliness, my grief, my lost time as convenience. That night, I stood in the kitchen staring at the folder where Dad kept the deed, and something inside me hardened. I hadn't stayed for the house, but if they were going to treat me like I'd taken something I didn't deserve, then maybe it was time I did. It took 2 conversations, one with Dad when he was still lucid enough to understand, and one with the lawyer who'd helped him with his affairs since before I was born. Dad didn't argue. He said, "I've been thinking about that anyway. You're the one who made this house a home." He signed it. I paid the processing fees myself. Angela and Nate never asked to see the paperwork. They assumed everything would be divided 3 ways like life had always been. Neat. Predictable. But they hadn't seen the days I cried on the kitchen floor. The nights I spoon-fed a man who once ran marathons. The holidays I spent alone when they couldn't make it home. They didn't see the cost. So when they left me nothing, it wasn't a surprise. It was a pattern. But what they didn't know was that I had finally broken it. After Dad passed, the house felt like a mausoleum. Quiet, clean, filled with echoes of voices that once carried life and urgency, now just memories trapped in drywall. I walked through each room, carefully packing things I wanted to keep: the faded photo albums, the recipe cards written in Mom's loopy handwriting, Dad's reading glasses still on his nightstand. Angela and Nate showed up the next weekend each with a bottle of wine and a rehearsed smile. They didn't ask how I was. They asked where the safe was. Angela made herself at home, immediately slipping off her heels and tossing her purse on the dining table like she still lived there. Nate walked around with his phone taking pictures of furniture. "That china cabinet," he said. "I think Mom promised that to me years ago." "And the grandfather clock," Angela added. "That was always meant for me." Grandmas remember. I didn't argue. I just nodded and said, "Let's take it slow." But that wasn't what they wanted. They came with a mental checklist, not memories. They weren't grieving. They were looting. By the 3rd hour, Angela had opened nearly every drawer in the house. Nate had already hauled the fishing gear to his truck. They didn't ask permission. They assumed they didn't need it. Because in their minds, I was still the help, still the one who stayed, still the one who owed them. The breaking point came when I walked into the kitchen and heard them talking low voices, casual tones. "She really thinks this place belongs to her," Angela whispered. "Well, technically it doesn't," Nate said. "It's part of the estate, right, split 3 ways. She's been living here for free for over a decade. She probably thinks that's payment enough." I stepped back into the hallway, my heart pounding, not with shock, but with clarity. There it was. The truth. They had reduced my life to a squatter's agreement. To them, I wasn't a caregiver. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't a daughter who gave up everything to keep this family stitched together. I was just someone in their way. That night, I sat in the sunroom, a cup of chamomile tea cradled between my hands. Outside, the wind rustled the trees Dad once planted with pride. My name was on that deed now. I had read it 3 times that week just to make sure. Sole owner Julia Anderson. I hadn't said a word yet. Let them assume. Let them inventory and strategize and pretend they had it all figured out. Because soon they were going to find out. And it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a fact. A few days later, Angela called me, voice sugar-coated, but slightly sharp at the edges. So I spoke with the estate lawyer, she said. We should start the probate process soon. There's going to be a lot of paperwork, and the house will need to be appraised. I let her finish. Then I said, actually, the house won't be part of the estate. A beat of silence. What do you mean Dad transferred it to me last fall? Full ownership. It's already filed with the county. You can call the clerk's office if you want confirmation. The silence turned cold. She tried to recover, but that doesn't make sense. We all lived here. It's the family home. Yes, I said quietly. And I'm the one who kept it standing. She didn't respond. Not really. Just a clipped, we'll talk later, and a soft click. Later that night, I stood in the hallway with the deed in my hands, rereading the final clause. To Julia Anderson for her years of care, sacrifice, and loyalty. This home is her piece. Dad wrote that himself, asked the lawyer to add it in his own words. They left me nothing in the will, but long before that, they'd already taken more than they realized: my time, my freedom, my future. And now I had taken something back. Not out of spite, but out of justice. The will reading was held in a modest conference room at the law office Dad had used for years. Same building where he used to take me for ice cream after signing papers when I was a kid. The irony wasn't lost on me. Angela wore a navy pantsuit like she was accepting an award. Nate brought his wife, who sat quietly in the corner, with crossed arms and raised eyebrows. I came alone. No performance, no jewelry. Just the quiet truth in my bag, the deed signed and sealed. The lawyer, Mr. Harris, shuffled his papers and cleared his throat. Per the instructions of Mr. Raymond Anderson, he began, "We will now review the terms of his final will and testament." Angela leaned forward, pen in hand. Nate had that glazed-over look he wore during boring meetings, half listening, already thinking about what would be his. They didn't see this coming. Harris continued, "To my son, Nathaniel, I leave my fishing collection and grandfather's tools. To my daughter, Angela, I leave the heirloom china set and my mother's jewelry. All remaining cash assets will be divided evenly between the two." Angela smiled. Nate nodded, satisfied. Then Harris turned the page. "As for the property at 417 Brookhaven Lane, this home is not part of the estate. It was legally transferred prior to my death. Sole ownership, Julia Anderson." The room went silent. I didn't flinch. Angela's smile froze in place. Nate sat up straighter, suddenly alert. What he barked. He gave her the house. Harris looked at them over the top of his glasses. "Yes. Months ago. The title is recorded with the county. It's final." She tricked him, Angela hissed. She manipulated him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. Instead, I opened my bag, pulled out a copy of the deed, and slid it gently across the table. "Dad made his decision," I said. "He didn't need anyone's permission." Angela's face twisted. "This isn't fair." "No," I replied calmly. "What wasn't fair was me caring for both our parents while you two built lives without looking back. This is justice." Nate pushed back his chair. "So what now? You keep the house and we get what dishes?" I nodded once. "Sounds about right." They didn't say goodbye when they left. They stormed out. Angela muttering about lawyers. Nate throwing a glare over his shoulder. But their power had vanished. Because for the first time, I had stood my ground. I didn't wait to be invited. I didn't beg to be recognized. I took what I had earned, not in blood or money, but in loyalty, in years and sacrifice. And now it was mine. Not stolen, not inherited, claimed. That evening, I stood on the front porch of the house. My house. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the lawn. The trees Dad planted decades ago rustled gently in the wind. I could almost hear Mom humming in the kitchen, her voice dancing with the breeze. I walked inside barefoot, feeling the cool wood beneath my feet. I didn't feel victorious. I felt whole. Because I hadn't fought to win. I had simply stopped losing. They never came back. Not after the will reading, not after the shouting, not after I finally said the things I should have said years ago. Angela sent one email, short-clipped and full of legal jargon, asking me to reconsider the deed transfer and honor what Mom and Dad would have wanted. I didn't reply, because what Mom and Dad actually wanted was someone there at 2 a.m. when the oxygen tank beeped. Someone who held their hands when the world turned to hospital walls and machines. Someone who didn't just show up for the inheritance photo. And I was that someone. In the weeks that followed, I started reclaiming the house, not just legally, but emotionally. I repainted the living room, a soft gray, the color Dad always said reminded him of rainy mornings in Maine. I tore down the old curtains and let the light in. I even turned Angela's old bedroom into a guest room for friends, not family. One Saturday, I invited the neighbor's daughter over for tea. She was in her 20s, caring for her own mother after a car accident. I saw something in her that I recognized: tired eyes, a strong smile, a loneliness that came from doing too much for people who assumed she had nothing else to do. We sat on the porch and talked for hours. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a human being, not a placeholder. It's funny. People think taking back your life has to be loud. They expect slamming doors, screaming matches, dramatic exits. But for me, taking my life back looked like opening the windows, rearranging furniture, walking barefoot across the floor without tiptoeing around someone else's entitlement. I didn't take the house out of revenge. I took it because love without acknowledgement is labor. And labor deserves compensation. I still think about Angela and Nate sometimes, not with anger, just detachment. They became strangers in a story I no longer needed to reread. I don't know if they'll ever understand. I don't need them to, because for years I was the woman who stayed silent. Now I am the woman who owns the deed. I had to lose their approval to gain my peace. And if you've ever been the one holding everyone else together, the one who gives, without being asked, the one left off the thank you card, let me tell you this. You're allowed to stop. You're allowed to claim what's yours. You're allowed to say, this time I choose me. Have you ever been left with nothing after giving everything? What would you do if the people you sacrificed for erased you when it counted most? Share your story below. Because someone else needs to know they're not alone. And maybe it's time you put your name on the deed.